All right, good morning. Thanks for joining us this beautiful Wednesday morning for our version of Inspire the Spirit, our weekly devotional. Just want to start by wishing a happy birthday to my mother-in-law, Joy Corvin. We know she's watching, so we all say happy birthday. Got children, grandchildren in the room, so we look forward to celebrating with you later this evening. There was a man named Soren Kierkegaard who was a Danish theologian, and he wrote, "It is more blessed to give than to receive, but then is also more blessed to be able to do without than to have to have." Now, what's that mean? We've all heard more blessed to give than receive. And it tells us to give, we have something to give. We've been blessed. But he said it's even more blessed for us that if we're able to do without things than to have them. And we're blessed in this country with an abundance of everything. And when we always want the new iPhone, that new pair of Air Jordans, new workout shoes, we want the greatest, the newest Louis Vuitton purse that comes out, we just always got to have something new. But this little passage he wrote teaches us things about spiritual discipline, self-control, and contentment. Because sometimes we want things that we don't need, but we have to have it, so we go into debt, spend money we don't have just to get something, even though what we already have is more than adequate and more in an abundance. So how does spiritual discipline, self-control, and contentment tie in today's verse? I'm going to read you today's verse, and you're going to ask, that's not what that verse is about. Today's verse is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, when you hear that verse, you think of what? You think of athletes, right? You think of sports goals, maybe business goals. But let's look at it. I can do all things. Let's look at the word all. So I looked up the word all in the dictionary. You know what it means? It means all. That's what it means. It's everything. And we can do all things through Christ. So to do something through Christ, with Christ living in us, means it has to be according to His will. It has to be something that He's planned and destined for our lives. And then it says the word strengthens. And it teaches us that the strength comes not from our own inner power, but from the Holy Spirit and God's power living within us. So the spiritual discipline that we just mentioned is the word all. To discern good and evil, good things, bad things. That's all. It means good and bad. The self-control comes through the aspect of it's Christ. And when Christ is in us, a fruit of the Spirit, of the Holy Spirit is what? Self-control. And the strength is the contentment. To always know that no matter what our limits are, we should always be content that the strength that we have through Jesus alone is always more than enough. Now, we all know why this verse is famous. It's one of the most quoted verses on the Bible. Coffee mugs, posters, t-shirts, you name it. It's quoted everywhere. And people often turn to it for encouragement when they're facing challenges or big goals. You're going to go run a 5K. You got to start training. You're quoting Philippians 4:13. You're on the sidelines. You're in the tunnel getting ready to run out for a big game. You're quoting 4:13. You're in a boardroom. CEOs rolling out the new sales forecast and the new job assignments and this new product launch. And you're quoting Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But sometimes we have to take a step back and realize all things aren't necessarily what's best for us. There was a pastor named Philip Yancey who was a theologian, who was an evangelist, he was an author, he was a public speaker, and he ran a church, and he mentored young pastors, and he was constantly traveled to speaking events, and he was writing books. And he sat in his meeting one day with his staff and he says, I'm burned out. I can't keep saying yes to everything. I can't keep this pace up. I'm smoked. I can't even tell you last time I had a vacation. So I'm taking a sabbatical for a week. You guys are going to have to figure it out. And where did he go on his little vacation / sabbatical? He didn't go to Disney World. He didn't go to the beach. He went to a monastery. Because in a monastery, you can go visit the monks there, and in that monastery, there's no internet, there's no outside communication, there's no electricity. If there's any news or any message that needs to get to you, they have to bring it to the front door. And the monks welcomed him. He checked all the stuff things. You're not allowed to have anything. So he just had his clothes and his Bible, and they walked him to his room. They opened the door, said, we're glad you're here. We hope you enjoy your stay. But then they said something interesting. If you need anything, let us know, and we'll teach you how to live without it. What a powerful statement. Because you think you need a lot. And they just said, let us know what you need, and we'll teach you how to live without it. You see, we all need something, but sometimes we have to remove the noise and the clutter and the stuff that constantly the world's throwing at us. We have to realize all we need is Jesus. And Jesus is enough. And through Him we can do all things, through Christ who strengthens us. Now we've all seen this verse quoted by pro athletes, right? Tim Tebow comes to mind. We've seen him put it on the eye black. We've seen players write it, PHI 413 on their sweatbands. We've seen it on their cleats and shoes. And it's great because it's an empowering and encouraging verse. By all means, I think this is one of the best verses for athletes and goal setters and people that just want to get things done. It's just such a powerful, short verse, easy to remember. But Paul did not write these words from a football field or a locker room or a boardroom. He wrote them from prison. And to understand the verse, it's the last verse of a passage. Let's read the entire passage to get the context of this verse. So we're going to read Philippians 4, verses 10 through 13. Paul wrote, I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you are concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. Look at that context. He's in a prison. And if you look at the mission he was given as he traveled around sharing the gospel, there was times when he had a lot and he enjoyed things. He would go to a town that had wealth, an aspiring church, and someone he knew that had money would invite him into his house. He didn't have his own house, didn't have his own food. They'd invite him into the home. He'd have a nice bed, could take a bath, have a warm meal. He had plenty. But more often than not, as Jesus guided him on his mission tour, he had to go into areas of poverty. He had to go into areas where he didn't have a bath. He had to sleep on the ground. He may have went days without food. And so he's telling us in this passage, sometimes you enjoy and sometimes you endure. But what he learned, no matter his circumstances, he said, I have a secret. His purpose remained the same. His purpose was to serve Jesus and to spread the gospel. So no matter what went on around him, that never changed. And that is when he wrote the words, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. All things meant the pleasant journeys and the bad journeys. And whatever it was, he knew it was Christ working through him and strengthening him to complete his calling. Paul's strength didn't come from his circumstances or even his own willpower. He acknowledged it all came from Jesus. And this verse doesn't mean God will give us strength to do absolutely anything we want. Because let's be honest, sometimes we want to do things that aren't in our best interest. We can be our own worst enemy sometimes. But what it is telling us, it promises that whatever situation we face, Jesus can give us strength to endure and remain faithful to him. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. So whether you're training to run a 5K, or you're one of those crazy people trying to train to run a marathon, whether you're starting up a ministry, whatever your calling is, sometimes you're going to have a lot. You're going to have abundance. Sometimes you're going to have a little. You're going to face some scarcity. But the verse reminds us, you always have enough in Jesus. There was a young lady, grew up planting flowers with her mom. Her mom died in the late 1920s, and it crushed her life. They had a lot, and the family lost everything. The Great Depression kicks in. And where they grew flowers, this young woman had to grow vegetables just to survive. And shortly as the world was rebounding, her and her brother were living in Paris, France. And the Germans decide to go on the warpath. And the Germans invade Paris. Her brother was studying to be a fashion designer. And he said, hey, this ain't good. Germans are rolling down the road. They're coming underneath the Eiffel Tower. I got to get to London. I'm going to London to continue my work in the fashion world. Are you coming with me? And she said no. She stayed behind. And she became part of what was known as the French Resistance. And during this resistance, this group, this underground network, would go about and they would isolate where the Germans were positioning themselves and what they were doing. And they would convey and relay messages to each other to warn neighborhoods, hey, Gestapo's coming in. Be on guard. They would also send messages. The commander of the French army had to flee to England. And they would send messages back. And part of this message is, here's where the Germans are. Here's what they're doing. Here's what they're saying. Part of that led to the invasion of Normandy and D-Day. And shortly before, right when D-Day was occurring, her and her network, the group was having a meeting. And someone sold them out. The Germans had got to one of their members and had threatened to kill him. And they talked. And 27 of them got arrested. And they tortured and killed the leader right in front of them. And this young woman was taken to a back room, to a bathtub full of iced water. They stripped her naked. They beat her. They bound her, blindfolded her, and threw her in the tub and submerged her and would pull her out, gagging and gasping for air. They wanted names. They wanted safe houses, who they'd been in contact with. They were wanting to break the deal. For 45 minutes, they would dunk her and submerge her till her last gasp. And when she came out, they wanted her to spit out these names. And yet all she spit out was water. She never broke. She relied that she could do all things through Christ who strengthened her. They threw her in a dark room overnight. And the next day, they repeated the same torture, except this time it went for 2 hours, being submerged, dunked, and beaten just to give up some names. The Allies were quickly closing in on Paris, so that the Germans had to split. So they took the young woman, they put her on a train, and they sent her to the Ravensbrück concentration camp. Now, this concentration camp was designed for women only, and it was built to hold 6,000 women. When she got there, there were 40,000 women there. And during the entire course of the war, over 50,000 women died underneath this camp, where they were continuing to be brutalized, abused, tortured, very little food, very little rations, and constantly working. The abuse she took in that camp was so severe she could never have children again. And this was a beautiful young woman who now was looking more like a human skeleton. And eventually the Allied Army, the U.S. forces came in and liberated them. And they found her near death. And they put her in a hospital. And it took her over a month to recover. And they had to identify all these people and find their nearest kin. Her brother had moved back into Paris. And they've made the connection. And they reached out and they said, hey, we're putting your sister on a train. You can pick her up at the train station. As the brother stood at the train station, the sister walked right up to him. And he looked around her because he did not recognize her. The abuse had been so great and the wear and tear of war. And yet she had survived. She relied on this verse. And when he recognized her, he broke down. When she said, it's me, it's your sister. He took her home, and for 2 weeks she laid in bed. He nourished her, got her back to strength, and she started to recover some of her beauty and some of her natural features. And the war moved on. She got healthy again, and she opened up a flower shop, became the first licensed female to be allowed to sell flowers and own a business in Paris. And he continued to work on his fashion design. And 2 years later, 1947, war's well behind him. Paris is known as like the fashion design capital of the world, right? They're going to have their first big presentation. And the young man, the brother, is getting ready to release a line of clothing that was being phrased as the new look, the post-war era look. It was going to revolutionize fashion in the world. And of course, along with the clothes, he had all the accessories, and he had a perfume that he had made from roses and jasmine that a sister had grown and cultivated. But here's the problem. They're set up, they're waiting for the cat walks in, they're in the back room, the models are getting dressed, all the clothing, everything, the world, the press is outside, waiting for the curtains to open. And he's panicking because he doesn't have a name for the perfume. And he's sitting there struggling. His sister walked in the room. And the brother's assistant says, Christian, Miss Dior is here. And Christian Dior popped his head up and looked at his sister, who was looking beautiful, just like she used to. And he said, that's it. I'm naming the perfume Miss Dior. And Miss Dior became one of the top-selling perfumes in not only the history of the world, still today, it's one of the top all-time selling perfumes. And Christian Dior gave his sister's name to it to build his empire on because of her strength, her determination, and perseverance. The company took off. Christian Dior was a hit, and their wealth grew exponentially, and they became a worldwide household name, still known today. Christian died suddenly in 1957 at the age of 52, and his sister, Catherine Dior, stepped in and took over the business because she knew she could do all things through Christ who strengthened her. And she built that legacy in that company. And she built the museum of Christian Dior in Paris, in their hometown. And she lived until June 17th, 2008, where she died at 90 years old. And she spent that entire year overseeing that business, making sure it was properly ran and successful, and she grew them flowers. The scent of Miss Dior is roses and jasmine. And she would grow this massive flower garden and would sell directly to the company to make sure she controlled the scent. A young war veteran once asked her how she managed to survive everything she'd been through. Her answer was simple: love life, young man, love life. So next time, it was written, the next time someone lifts off a cap of a bottle of Miss Dior, they're not just smelling perfume. They're catching a trace of a woman who chose silence over betrayal, who walked out of the worst that the century had to offer, and who spent the rest of her life providing and proving that something beautiful can still grow out of ground that's been scorched clean. So as we wrap up here today, what can this verse mean for you? When life feels overwhelming, you don't have to rely on yourself. Ask God for His strength and trust that He will always give you just what you need to face today. Philippians 4:13 is a wonderful motivational verse. It's an inspirational verse. And we really use it when we're at the top of the mountain and we're trying to set a personal record in the gym, or we're trying to win the big game, or we're trying to accomplish a goal at work, or whatever it is. We all quote Philippians 4:13. But it's not just a great motivational verse. It's also a verse about being content in the situation you're in and present in the moment. And it's also a survival verse, that no matter how bad things are, you can still do all things through Christ. So whether you're in a season of abundance right now, a season of scarcity, or you're just in a season of uncertainty about your future and where things are going, I encourage you today, whatever season of life you're in, just quote and rely on Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Have a blessed week. We hope to see you right back here next Wednesday morning.